popular buzzword during Trump's campaign has been wokeness. Now it is joined by DEI. As he and his personal staff work to purge the US government, DEI is the popular scapegoat for all problems which arise and the clear evil which must be eliminated. What even is DEI, and what does this mean for America? I'm Catherine, and am here to try and help and clarify what is happening. First off, DEI is not a complete Biden administration invention. It is not a new concept. Much of governmental DEI today stems from Presidents Kennedy and Johnson's initiatives for equal opportunity. Kennedy first passed affirmative action back in 1961. It's over 60 years ago, and he did this with an executive order. The goal was that jobs were not limited for people based on their race, creed, color, or national origin. This means it does not matter what color one's skin is, what their ethnic origin is, what their religious faith or lack thereof is, nor if they are immigrants. What nation they originated in doesn't matter either. Kennedy passed this order for the federal government, so anyone applying for a position in the government could not be discriminated against. This was followed by the Civil Rights Act of 1964. This act moved beyond the governmental sector, now into the private sector. Businesses, schools, clubs, etc. could not discriminate against anyone based on their color, race, religion, national origin, and it added their sex or gender. In 1965, Johnson followed this with another executive order, which included not only government positions, but any contractors or subcontractors the government dealt with. At no level was it permitted to reject a candidate solely on their color, race, religion, national origin, or sex. Clinton first clearly addressed sexual orientation in 1995 in an executive order which clarified people could not be discriminated against for their security clearances. This has become pretty much par for the course. That is not to say that individuals are unable to say no to people whose lifestyles they do not agree with. There have been landmark cases when the private sector discriminates against individuals as customers, such as the Masterpiece Cake Shop versus Colorado Civil Rights Commission. A privately owned cake shop in Colorado refused to bake a gay couple's wedding cake. The case made its way to the Supreme Court, where it was dismissed. The court sided with the private business and cited its right to free speech. Citizens still have the freedom to disassociate with individuals they do not agree with, as long as it doesn't infringe on their rights. Regardless of how many may feel about this, the freedom is still there. It's not been taken away. What cannot occur is discrimination which prevents individuals from earning a livelihood when they are qualified, or for having access to various necessities such as healthcare. DEI stems more from the Supreme Court siding against affirmative action in 2023 in the case Students for Fair Admissions versus Harvard. Biden already signed 2 executive orders which encourage diversity back in 2021. When reading through these orders, there is nothing stating people of color or trans individuals have to be hired instead of white men. Instead, these 2 orders point out that various individuals are underrepresented in the government. This means these people are not necessarily heard in society and need to be better represented. This makes perfect sense, as the needs of elderly white men are not going to be the same societal needs of young black women. Straight, cisgender individuals do not face the same experiences as gays or trans or any other variety of people. We are all different and have vastly different experiences. We cannot be forced to fit the same mold. What should be noted is in these executive orders, the wording was neutral. It pointed out the deficiency in the government and it strove to adjust. On the other hand, the wording used to repeal Biden's diversity orders is inflammatory and intends to antagonize and stir up hate. Now that the government has removed DEI and affirmative action, well, it should not be a problem. After all, society is all about equality, and Trump is promoting a merit-based system. We are already seeing companies all around remove their DEI programs, even though technically they do not have to just because the government did. These are programs which have been in place in some form, even if only due to previous governmental rulings, since the 1970s. Now, major companies like Target, Walmart, McDonald's are completely closing down their DEI initiatives. These are the same companies which made very big shows of diversity and equality in their workplace over the years when diversity was encouraged. In 2020, Target CEO Brian Cornell promised to increase Target's black workforce after George Floyd was murdered not far from Target's headquarters, only 10 minutes away. In 2022, Target received an award for its outstanding commitment to achieving diversity, equity, and inclusion. In 2023, Cornell defended their commitments to DEI as they were also helpful to Target's business. However, almost immediately after Trump signed his executive orders against DEI, Target announced, no longer increasing the black workforce. Instead, it was evaluating its work with smaller businesses. That's the new cure-all for everything. This is an example of how quickly and easily businesses capitulate to changes in the highest level of government, even if they will not be directly impacted by laws. This is part of the problem with Trump's reversal of DEI and affirmative action. Then there is the effect on institutions of learning. Colleges are now scrambling to reevaluate their diversity programs. Colleges and universities are supposed to be places of learning, which analyze the world around them. Students should be encouraged to question what they are taught. They need to feel safe to explore the world. They should not be force-fed propaganda and told what they may think. A good professor and a good learning environment encourage students to make their arguments regardless of their position. What is necessary is to analyze, dig deep, and prove their points with supporting evidence. This should not simply parrot the narrative of one side. As part of the DEI purge, Trump has declared any institutions which receive government funds must remove any DEI programs, period. Colleges around America are reacting in a variety of ways. In a 2021 report, public universities in America received about 40% of their funding through federal money. This comes in a variety of means, such as research grants, student funds like Pell Grants, etc. The point is, 40% of the funds come from the federal government in some form. According to Trump's latest order, this means the schools need to remove DEI programs. Currently, a number of schools are referring any references to diversity from their websites. Programs are being canceled which dealt with diversity. Rutgers University canceled a session which hosted students from historically black colleges. Some schools are simply changing the wording in an attempt to circumvent the new order. Instead of words like diversity and equity, the University of Massachusetts in Boston has a webpage which is titled Inclusion and Belonging. Mount Holyoke College refused to change any of their wording. They noted Trump's orders can technically be legally challenged. At the same time, Trump called for compliance investigations into any schools which have over $1 billion in endowments. In the Department of Education, employees were placed on administrative leave and their email accounts were suspended. All DEIA, diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility employees were immediately on this leave, while the Department of Education worked to close the DEIA department entirely. A number of these individuals on leave are staffers such as civil rights attorneys. These attorneys help students with discrimination issues. They're not pushing anybody to hire someone, they're helping people who are discriminated against. There has also been a backlash after the Air Force removed diversity in its basic training teachings. After Trump's order, footage showing Tuskegee Airmen and Women's Air Force Service Pilots, WASPs, was removed from training. Due to the backlash, this was put back in place. Hegseth of the Department of Defense followed the order with Identity Months dead at DoD. Again, please note the aggressive, negative wording. There are far more tactful ways to eliminate programs at DoD, such as stating the cessation of extra programs. Then the body of the notice could explain which programs were removed, and maybe it could be attributed to funding issues. Instead, the Department of Defense chose to continue the rhetoric against wokeness and kill identity months. Granted, it does state personnel are not barred from attending cultural awareness events on their own time. It does, however, make it far more difficult depending on where the military members are stationed. Here in Germany, pretty much all of the American events are held on the bases. Many overseas assignments do this as, well, quite frankly, much of the military community is not integrated in the local environment. Even those who are, the foreign nations do not celebrate the same events. Since the entire military base, including all the social locations, all the activity locations, the whole base is technically an official resource. The current mandate is to not hold any of these events on the base at all. In our region, activities were canceled. The word has been spread through some non-official channels that a celebration found a location off the base at the last minute. This is a shame, though. What this does is shut down any acknowledgement of diversity among the troops, the civilian workers, their families. It's easy enough to state the military will focus on the warrior culture of all races, genders, and backgrounds, but not acknowledging those various backgrounds ignores part of their strength in overcoming barriers. While there have been Black American soldiers in quite a number of wars, dating back to the American Revolution, the founding of the nation, it does not mean that all Black soldiers were treated equally to the whites, if any. It was seen as an opportunity for Black men to step outside their place when they were allowed to wear the same uniform as the white men. There was legitimate concern from higher officials to not allow Black soldiers in World War I and II, or more specifically World War I, because they would step outside their place. Black soldiers fought in World War I and II, but upon returning home, they were lynched, killed, for daring to wear their uniforms. One case concerned Wilbur Little in 1919. When he returned home from World War I and stepped off the train, a group of white men were waiting for him. They stripped off his uniform and demanded he never wear it again. When Little wore it a few days later, he was lynched. Similar accounts occurred after World War II. These soldiers fought through civil rights protests and fighting back against the system, and eventually they overcame the hurdles against them through their own strength and determination. They were warriors, but look at how they were warriors and part of their warrior culture. The same goes for women. Again, there's a long history of women serving either in the military or alongside the military in some capacity since the Revolution, where you had camp followers, you had spies, you had suppliers, whatever. They were helping the military. In both world wars, they were reviled. Women were often portrayed as, prostitutes. If a woman joins the military, then she's obviously a slut. She was sleeping around. Even though these same women were serving as nurses and other non-combatant jobs to help support the male troops, they were maligned by even their fellow soldiers. It was considered humiliating to have women protect the nation. Okay, they were not lynched like the Black soldiers, but sexual assault was not uncommon. A double whammy was the female Black soldiers in World War II. The film The 6888 depicted some of what these women went through. They had to endure both racial and gender biases from soldiers while being set up to fail by leaders who did not want them in a position of authority or in a position where they're actually helping and contributing more than just, cooking food and cleaning. These leaders wanted to prove that these Black women were substandard and not intelligent enough and not up to any task that took any effort. This is only the tip of the iceberg. Queer soldiers have been forced to hide their identities for generations. It was only in the 1990s that Clinton somewhat began to fix this with the don't ask, don't tell policy. But even then, soldiers couldn't come out as gay. It was just, if they didn't happen to mention it, they couldn't be kicked out for being gay. Later on, finally, in the 2000s, they were actually allowed to be openly gay. Now, transgender soldiers are in danger of losing their rights. The U.S. Military Academy at West Point just announced the end of 12 clubs which fell under their former Office of Diversity and Inclusion. Some of these clubs had been around for decades, before this department was even created. But since they were sponsored by the now closed office, rather than finding other sponsorship for the clubs, the Academy simply disbanded them. This is using the dismantling of DEI as an excuse to get rid of programs, without any alternatives. A potential side effect is not the strengthening of the warrior culture like Hegseth seems to claim, but rather the weakening of soldiers' mental health. There is the very real threat that non-white, straight, cis male soldiers will, quite frankly, begin to feel more and more isolated. It was like this in the past. Who's to say this is not going to come back? Sure, this will play into Hegseth's ideal of what constitutes a good military unit. After all, he's been quoted as saying he does not believe that Blacks should be serving in the military, or at least in combat positions. He's said that women should not be serving in combat positions. but it weakens the military as a whole, and it removes many qualified soldiers who are an asset to their job. Another example of DEI gone awry, the White House official website. Back in 2017, Trump had the Spanish pages of the site removed, and he immediately did this again. What is the logic? Does he not want all those evil immigrants to have access to public information? Well, that's not very effective. Google Translate can easily make the pages accessible to those who only speak Spanish. What he is doing is disenfranchising over 3 million American citizens from Puerto Rico alone. It is easy for some to forget, but America is not just the 50 states and DC. The nation does have a few Commonwealth locations. People born in Puerto Rico are American citizens. However, most speak Spanish at home as the primary language, as the dominant language. By removing the Spanish pages from the White House site, Trump is clearly sending the signal that these people do not matter. They are not a part of his plan for America and should not be well informed nor included. Complaining about Trump closing DEI programs may seem silly and an overreaction. However, it goes beyond simply dismantling DEI. It's not just a matter of eliminating the jobs. Now, the Office of Personnel Management created an email so people could inform on any DEI employees who may have slipped through the cracks. Gotta catch them all. Employees have been threatened if they knowingly do not turn in DEI coworkers. This is beginning to sound a little familiar. Do they also want children to turn in their DEI parents? Should neighbors report any DEI employees they still see heading to work? Maybe one should report anyone they heard making DEI comments. This is turning into a police state with the warning that people should turn in those they know. These employees did not break any laws. They simply ran afoul of Trump and his administration for being in a job set up by a previous leader, a job that doesn't harm anybody. Federal health employees have now voiced alarm after finding names of workers on a DEI target list online. People are genuinely afraid of being attacked for simply doing their legal, non-harmful jobs. We are not talking about people who maybe kill for a living, maybe protesting over soldiers who were involved in a murderous campaign. We are not talking about people who make legal decisions which determine people do not get aid, do not get healthcare, etc. We are talking about people who donated to political parties or went to work and tried to help the underrepresented. Should we really be targeting these individuals? Aside from the issue of pushing away many individuals who are just not white, straight, cis men, this also adds other obstacles to those who do not conform to what the current administration supports. There are quite a number of people in America who look for opportunities to commit hate against those they do not agree with. This type of legislation emboldens racists, misogynists, etc. A very clear message was already sent when Trump pardoned most and commuted the sentence of the rest of the January 6 rioters. Even though these people had attacked the Capitol and law enforcement officers, they are the heroes of America. These are the same types of people who are happy to attack citizens they do not like based on the color of their skin or their sexual leaning. The leader of the Proud Boys, Enrique Tarrio, and the leader of the Oath Keepers, Stuart Rhodes, were freed after serving almost none of their 18 and 22-year prison sentences, respectively. They have both made it clear they are out for revenge. Jacob Chansley, the QAnon shaman, was pardoned, and one of the first things he did was post on X. This is not a comforting post. While Chansley claims he would not do the things the same way if he could go back, he also stated that he regretted nothing, and he learned from this experience. These are the types of people encouraged by the removal of DEI. In their eyes, they now have free rein to attack those they do not agree with, and they can even arm themselves to do so with all the repeals of various regulations against gun control. Speak up, speak out. Let your representatives know you do not want this for your country. Do you really want a country filled with hate and random attacks on people? Shape your future.